weight loss, and onto optimal health. His first short book, the DIY Spud Fit Challenge, a how-to guide tackling food addiction with the humble spud, was co-authored by his wife Mandy Van Zanen and has helped thousands of people to break the shackles of food addiction. The Advanced DIY Spud Fit Challenge is Andrew's online education program, which takes members through an in-depth, individually tailored, is that a pun there, man? Individually tailored, okay, approach to long-term sustainable behavioural change. Through a series of 28 interactive lessons, members learn to tackle the root cause of their weight gain and ill health and apply simple, straightforward and logical steps to turning their life around. A wonderful speaker with a wonderful message. Please welcome to the stage, Andrew Spudfit Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for hanging around to watch me after that amazing panel discussion beforehand. I appreciate it. So my story starts a few years ago. I was vegan for a long time before I did my year of only potatoes, and I was actually here on World Vegan Day 2015, and I would have been hanging out mostly over in the tent over there, just stuffing my face with as much vegan junk food as I could. And enjoying the day, but not enjoying the aftermath of it. I was struggling with weight, and that's been a theme for me throughout my whole life. I've always been overweight, and always had a real difficulty with binging and overeating, and just struggling to get any sort of control on my weight. So yeah, this time 3 years ago, I was pretty out of control. I was 55 kilos heavier than I am now. And this belt, well, I wear it hanging out like that because it reminds me of where I've come from. I reckon if I put on 1 more kilo, that belt wouldn't have fit anymore. So that's how far I've come from in the last couple of years. Now, shortly, a couple of weeks after World Vegan Day 2015, I had a realisation. And that was that I've been a teacher for 15 years at that point in time, and every kid that I had ever taught, every kid that I'd ever wondered about how they got to be the way they are, it all made sense when I met their parents. Kids always end up like their parents. And when I had this realisation one day, it was the scariest thought I'd ever had in my life, because at the time I was morbidly obese, I was clinically depressed and anxious, and basically my life was going down the toilet. And becoming like me was the very last thing I wanted for my son at the time. He was just gone 2 years old at the time. And so that was a really hard thing for me to deal with, that no matter what I did with my life, I felt like my boy was going to end up being like me. And I needed to do something about becoming someone that I would have been proud of my boy becoming. So I didn't know how to deal with the depression and the anxiety. I thought I was stuck with that forever. But I thought maybe I can do something about my weight. So I started another weight loss, yet another of hundreds of different weight loss efforts. I had green smoothies for breakfast, salad for lunch. I was getting up at 5 a.m. to train. I was having healthy dinners. Everything was going well. It went well for about a month, where I lost weight, I got fitter, things were going well, and I thought, right, it's been a month. I can reward myself with a slice of pizza. Just one slice of pizza will do. And then I'll go back to being a healthy eater tomorrow. So I did that. I ordered well, of course you can't order one slice of pizza to be home delivered, so I ordered a family-sized pizza. And I had one slice, sat down to watch a movie, and the pizza was just out of sight, but not out of mind, just in the kitchen. And about half an hour after I had that slice, I thought, 2 slices won't hurt. I'll just have 2 slices, I'll get up extra early tomorrow, I'll do some extra training, I'll make up for it, and then I'll get back to my healthy ways tomorrow. I think you've probably guessed where this is leading by now. 2 slices turned into the whole pizza. You know, I couldn't throw the pizza away. I couldn't throw it in the bin because there are starving kids in Africa, so I have to eat the whole thing. Of course I did. You know, twisted logic, but that's the way it was. So I ate the whole pizza. I followed it up with a box of ice cream and Coke, and of course I didn't get up the next morning early and train, and I didn't have my green smoothie for breakfast or my salad for lunch, and basically I just fell in a heap. I was feeling really sorry for myself the next day, and you know, my depression and my anxiety was bigger than ever in that moment. And of course, I felt like the only thing that would fix my mood at that point in time was to have a beer. So I went to the fridge and got a beer. And as I sat down on the couch, cracked open my first beer, I had this sudden thought that, hang on a second, the way I'm treating food for my whole life, the way I've been treating food is the same way that an alcoholic would treat this beer in my hand. I suddenly put two and two together that if I'm treating food the same way an alcoholic would treat beer, that makes me a food addict. I'm a food addict. And at first that made me more scared because I thought, right, an alcoholic, at least they can quit. An alcoholic can quit food. But a food addict, what are they supposed to do? They can't quit food. You've got to keep eating. So I just, oh no, I'm stuck with this addiction for the rest of my life. There's nothing I can do about it. And I started wondering, maybe I can do something about it. Maybe I can quit some foods and not others and try to treat it like the way an alcoholic would treat alcoholism. Maybe I can quit all foods except one. I wonder if there's one food out there that I could eat that would keep me healthy and thereby allow me to use this abstinence model to treat my food addiction. So I did a lot of research. I spent 6 weeks researching. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of scientific studies. I watched online lectures from nutrition scientists and doctors. And I did hours and hours of this every day. And after 6 weeks, I concluded that the potato was the right choice. If I was going to quit food then and eat only one food, then potato was going to be the thing that would do it. So this decision was made 3 days before New Year's Day. And of course, everyone who's ever done a diet before knows that new diets don't start until Monday, right? So for me, it was New Year's Day was just around the corner, so I thought I'll just wait until New Year's Day. And my original plan was that I would do a month or maybe 2 months. But during that 3 days of thought, I suddenly had this idea one day that maybe I'm starting on the 1st of January. Maybe I could just do the whole year. I wonder what that would be like. And I don't really have any justification for it. And I still don't, other than that it was a cool idea. And I really thought that everything I needed to do would be done in 2 months, and that turned out to be right. But in that 3 days, I was wondering, I was filled with fear. Because every diet I'd ever tried in my life, I had failed dismally at, and I'd only succeeded in putting weight on again and more. So I was scared. I thought I wouldn't be good enough. I thought I wouldn't be strong enough or have the willpower. And I was just consumed by self-defeating thoughts that came with my depression and anxiety. And then I realised that I was really only giving myself time to think about all the negatives, all the ways that I wasn't good enough. And this was the biggest moment of my challenge when I decided, even before I'd started, that if I'm going to think of all the negatives, I should at least be fair on myself and give the same amount of time to thinking about what if things go right. Instead of thinking about what if I fail, what if I'm not good enough, what if I don't have what it takes, I decided to start devoting equal time, not shutting those thoughts out, but devoting equal time to what if I am good enough? What if I do succeed? What if this all works out? And what if I get everything out of it that I want? And that was really the biggest turning point in my life, just learning to think, learning to give myself equal time and be fair on myself with my thoughts and contemplate the positive side of things as well. So with that thought, I decided, why not? I'll just give it a go. I'll try for a year. If I don't do it, it'll just be like every other diet that I've failed at before. And, well, the worst that can happen is that I'll go back to living my life exactly as I am now, which I wasn't enjoying, but, I wasn't going to die from it or anything. I would just go back to living the way I was. So I decided to give it a try. It was a big experience. In the first couple of weeks, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I was massively addicted to junk food, vegan junk food, but yes, it was still junk food. You could argue that vegan ice cream is healthier than dairy ice cream, but it's still not healthy. So that was a problem, and it was hard for me to get over it. But I did, and I'll share with you a couple of thought processes that went on in my mind. The first thing was understanding the true nature of sacrifice. Because I was worried about missing out on the cake. I was worried about missing out on the pizza or missing out on all these different experiences. And I came up with this saying for myself that if you don't sacrifice for what you want, then what you want becomes the sacrifice. So that was a really big motivating thought for me, because when I reframed my choices like that, am I going to give up the chocolate cake, or am I going to give up my long-term health and happiness? That's the choice. It's never just give up the chocolate cake or nothing. It's give up the chocolate cake or give up my long-term health and happiness. Give up the ice cream or give up my long-term health and happiness. And when I took the time to think about it properly like that, it was a huge help. Another one, hands up if you've seen The Matrix. Yeah, most people have, right? There's a scene in the first movie where Neo gets in the car with Trinity and the others, and straight away the guy in the front turns around with a machine to get the bug out of his guts, and he freaks out a bit, and there's guns, and he just freaks out and goes, "Stop the car." And they stop the car, and he opens the door, and he looks down a long, dark, wet laneway. It's really depressing looking laneway that goes off into the distance, into darkness. And he goes to get out of the car, and Trinity stops and grabs his hand and says, "Trust me." And he turns around and says, "Why?" And she says, "Because you've been down that road, you know where it leads, and I know that's not where you want to be." And that was a scene that I replayed over and over and over in my mind over especially those first couple of weeks. Anytime I wanted to eat something that I shouldn't eat, anytime I told myself that I was doing well and deserved a reward, or I could just eat that one M&M, or not M&M because they're not vegan, but, tiny lolly. Anytime I told myself I could do that and then go back to being healthy the next day, I reminded myself that I'd told myself that so many times in the past. I've been down that road, I know where it leads, and it always leads back to full-on food addiction and weight gain. So that was those were a couple of big lessons for me. Now I'm going to just talk for a few more minutes, and then I'll take some questions. But I just wanted to dispel some myths. I don't know if you guys all saw my story on the news, but I was on the news quite a bit, and every time I was on the TV, there was always an expert that was full of concerns and misleading things about what I was doing. The first was that, one of the most common, probably the same things that questions about all kinds of veganism. There was protein. He's not going to get enough protein. He's going to die of protein deficiency. There's protein in potatoes. I was getting plenty of protein. Calcium C, same thing. Vitamins and minerals. Potatoes cover everything. They've got a small amount of fats in them. Everything I needed was covered. The biggest thing that I heard from these experts was that it's too extreme. Everything should be in moderation. Everything should be in moderation. You should be able to eat your chocolate cake and your donuts in moderation. And my reply to that was that you would never tell an alcoholic to drink beer in moderation. You would never tell a heroin addict to shoot up just once a week. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, sure, there are probably many people in this crowd, many people here today that can do that, and that's fine. If you can do that, that's great. But I think it's wrong to say that that applies to everybody. There are plenty of people, myself included, who cannot do moderation with junk food. Moderation, one bit of chocolate cake a week quickly becomes 3 bits of chocolate cake every day. And that's not a healthy thing. And the other part of that question, this idea of moderation, is that every super successful person throughout history has shunned moderation. Roger Federer doesn't play tennis in moderation. Mozart didn't play piano in moderation. The West Coast Eagles football players who won the grand final this year, they don't do football in moderation. If you want success, if you want extreme results, then you need to do extreme things. It's the only way it works. Anyone who wants to get the best out of themselves can't do moderation. Moderation leads to mediocrity. So this developed for me into, it started off as by accident, basically. I got attention by accident. I thought this was the most boring thing a person could do, but then journalists got a hold of it, and I was on the news a lot, like I said, and I started getting thousands of emails. Every day I was answering hundreds and hundreds of emails for quite a few months from people that wanted help, people that resonated with my story, that saw something of me in them, in the food addiction battle. So it organically grew from just some weird little experiment that I did for myself into something where I was coaching people and where I was trying to help people with food addiction along the way. I even ended up writing a book after about 10 months, a short book. Come and see me after if you're interested in it. But it's a guidebook for how to do this for yourself if you want to. And just a couple of weeks ago, I released my second book, which is not potatoes only, but a recipe book called Spud Fit again, with heaps of different recipes with potatoes and all sorts of other things. So this idea to quit food and treat my addiction with abstinence, but eating only potatoes, took on a life of its own, and it really has become everything I do. And I love that it has been able to transform not only my own life, but so many other lives as well. And I think a big lesson that we should take from that is, number one, do not fear carbs. There's all this big low-carb craze going on at the moment. If you eat carbs from whole food, plant-based sources, you're all good. Number two is also that the vegan diet, I'm an ethical vegan for 13 years now, or nearly 13 years. I'm all about vegan diet, and first and foremost, I'm an ethical vegan, but let's not confuse the vegan diet with automatically being healthy. There's plenty of junk food over in that tent over there, and it won't help you be healthy, and it won't help you lose weight. It's great for the animals, great for the environment, but if you want to be healthy, you need to focus on whole, unprocessed plant foods. So that's really what I'm about, and with potatoes, obviously, as the staple. So I eat these days what I call a whole food spud-based diet. So I eat all sorts of fruits, veggies, rice, grains, beans, and with potatoes as my main source of calories. So whole food plant-based diet will get you the health results you want, and include lots of potatoes as well. Now I think I've got a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes for some questions. So Mark, if you're ready. There's usually a few, yeah, we're ready. So there's usually a few questions. So if anyone's got any questions, put your hand up. Got a question down the front here. Maybe I'll come down to you.
How did you find getting back onto a relatively normal diet after you'd been on the Spud Fit diet for 12 months?
Yeah, thank you. So that was about including other foods into my diet. I wouldn't really call my diet these days a relatively normal one. My diet is very different to the general population. Like I said, a whole food plant-based diet with lots of potatoes as well. But really it was quite a simple process for me. By the end of a year, I felt like I was totally in control. I was at the point where I wasn't even looking forward to eating other foods. I was totally happy with potatoes, but I felt like it was just time for it to end. I wasn't particularly looking forward to any kind of food, and I just introduced other foods slowly. So I had a breakfast which was televised and everything, and I had an interesting meal. But after that, I basically went potatoes and broccoli for a week. And then I went potatoes, broccoli, bananas for another week. And I just slowly introduced foods like that. And I still eat very, very simply. I say my rules for that year were very, very narrow. And I think for an addict, it's very important to have narrow and strict focus. And I still have that, it's just a little bit wider. I haven't just dropped the rules altogether. I still have the strict and narrow focus, but it's just slightly wider to include fruits and vegetables and grains and beans. Yeah.
Would you be able to take us through a typical day of your eating?
Of now eating or
Yeah,
during the
now.
year? Now. Okay, so in my bag over there, I haven't even been in the food tent over there yet. I'll probably go and have a look around, but I don't think I'll buy anything. In my bag, I've got hummus that I made for myself with cut up celery and capsicum. Yesterday for dinner, I had a big pile of spinach with mashed potatoes on it and a can of baked beans with no oil. That's pretty typical of the way I eat. I often I cook up a batch of potatoes and just leave them in the fridge and just eat them cold like an apple. That's something I do often. Or just eat. Yesterday I had a bag of grapes for lunch. It's pretty simple. There's no real typical day other than to say that I include a lot of potatoes. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
What's your favourite way to eat a potato?
Okay. Favourite way to eat potatoes? It's hard to go past mash, I think. Everyone loves mashed potato, right? I do like my air fryer as well, though, which I didn't have until after I finished my year, which was a big mistake. I should have got it during the year, but air fried chips are very good too. But the old favourite's mashed potatoes. It's very hard to beat. Yeah, question here.
when you eat mashed potatoes, do you use oil and butter and stuff like that, or do you just go like, what do you do?
All right, so no, I never use any oil or butter or even vegan versions for anything. My typical mashed potato recipe is I'll get a pressure cooker which fits about 4 kilos of potatoes in it. I'll go 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, a big heaped teaspoon of vegetable stock, of whatever kind of vegetable stock, and chuck some nutritional yeast in there, and a bit of soy milk. No oil, soy milk as well, and that's my mashed potato recipe, and it's delicious. Yeah, you can't go wrong. Question up the back over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I did see you on the news and I thought it was a cool idea, so just wanted to let you know that.
Great.
Just when you were doing the year of just potato, did you eat a variety of different types of potatoes, or were you just sticking to white, or...
Okay, so...
Did you end up with a favourite variety if you did try a bunch?
Right. Yeah, so for the first month, I bought whatever was cheapest at the shop. I didn't really worry about what kind of potato it was. I ate any kind of potato, any kind of sweet potato, but I just went for whatever was cheapest. And then after my story at the beginning of February, it sort of broke and went viral, and I ended up with a local fruit and veg shop sponsoring me and giving me free potatoes. So then from then on, I just ate whatever the shop gave me. So it was really a combination of most of what I ate was just plain white potatoes and plain red potatoes, just what the shop gave me. And no, I don't really have a particular favourite. It's just probably, if I had to choose one, I'd say there's a particular variety called gourmandine potatoes, which I think you can get it in Coles. That's really good. And of sweet potato varieties, I like the Hawaiian purple sweet potatoes. But really, it doesn't matter. I just eat any kind of potatoes. It's all good. Got time for a couple more questions if anyone's got one. Everyone up the back up there. Keeping Mark fit here. Running around.
Where was it? Oh, sorry.
Hi. When you say you do a lot of coaching and stuff, what do you often tell your clients? Do you often recommend that they do something like a full year or shorten it down? How do you sort of tackle those food addiction issues in the advice you give?
Yeah, so I do a lot of coaching. My coaching is, I know it seems like it's all about potatoes, but my coaching is all focused on the psychology of the way you eat. A lot of the people I coach choose to do a period of potatoes only. If you want to do that, I think it's a good idea. I think 2 weeks is about the minimum. I usually recommend about a month because that gives you a good amount of time to really learn a lot about the way you think about potatoes. Just the simple act of eating only potatoes will reveal a lot about the way you talk to yourself and the way your inner voice works around food. You'll notice that for example, maybe late at night you feel hungry, or maybe at certain times of the day after work you've had a bad day at work and you want to stop past some junk food place on the way home from work, and when that option's taken away and all you've got is potatoes, you really do learn a lot about the excuses you make for yourself as far as allowing yourself to make bad choices with food. So for me, it's the major focus is all about the psychology behind food addiction and why we make the choices we make. And potatoes are really just a vehicle that really helps us to exaggerate those voices in our head, the way we talk to ourselves about food. It's just a sort of a magnifying glass, I guess you could say. So that's really what the potatoes are there for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Another one behind you there, Mark.
Andrew, congratulations on what you've been able to turn around your life.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you one thing. When you went back to eating a normal diet, per se, instead of just eating potatoes, did your weight fluctuate? And the other thing, how did you get over the blandness of potatoes, if there was one for you?
Okay, first question. I haven't weighed myself since the end of January 2017, which was a month after I finished. I was really only weighing myself because media wanted to know about it. My big belief is that the numbers on the scales are a symptom of a greater cause. All right, so my focus is on the cause, and the cause of the weight gain is your behaviour with food and the choices you make with food. So I haven't weighed myself in a long time. But yeah, my focus is on getting my behaviour right. And if your behaviour is right, then the weight will be whatever it is supposed to be. Sorry, the second part of the question about blandness. Yeah, so my approach to that, again, is different. I look at, I have a saying that make your food boring and your life interesting. All right, we need a dopamine hit from our food. We need that feel-good hormone to be flowing through our brain. It doesn't need to come from our food. It needs to come from our life in some way. So my choice was to remove that excitement and enjoyment and comfort and emotional support that we get from food and learn to get that from other areas of life. All right, so I choose to leave my food relatively boring, and if I'm feeling like I need some excitement from my food, that to me is a trigger that I need to actually not get something exciting from my food, but I need to go and find my little boy who's sitting over there and have a wrestle with him, or I need to go and have a run, or I need to sit down with my wife and watch a comedy movie, or a million other things. But I need to do exciting things, not eat exciting things. Does that make sense? Yeah. Stop. All right, we've got 1 minute, so one more question and then I'll be done. No more questions? All right, one question here, last question, and keeping Mark fit again, making him go end to end. I like it. Just over here in the white t-shirt, Mark.
Did you have, during that year, did you feel any cravings of like different things, or did they like start decreasing as the year went by?
Yeah, so the first couple of weeks were intense. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. The cravings were ridiculous and non-stop, all day, every day, for everything that's vegan junk. If World Vegan Day happened during those 2 weeks, my head would have exploded going around in there. But yeah, I learned strategies to deal with that. The things I talked about earlier about reframing the nature of sacrifice and understanding what I'm actually giving up by choosing to eat a donut or whatever. And that metaphor of the matrix that I talked about, and just learning mindfulness and learning to notice and be aware of what my inner voice is telling me, and basically not falling for my own crap. You know, when I'm trying to tell myself that it's okay to make this bad choice or that bad choice, just seeing through that and understanding that basically I can't be trusted to make my own choices around food. I need to trust the process that I had set in place and just follow it through and trust that everything would work out. So after a couple of weeks, I really felt like I settled into a groove, and I didn't really have too much trouble with cravings from then for the rest of the year. So yeah. All right, that's it from me. So thank you everyone for listening. Again, I've got this book, so come and meet me over here if you want to. If you've got any questions that you were too shy to ask in public, then come and ask me in private. I'm happy to answer questions. And come and talk to me afterwards, mate, if you think it's a bad idea. I think the proof is in the pudding, though, mate. If you had seen me beforehand, then look at me now. I'm a different person. So thank you.
Bang bang cocking it, Queen Nicki dominant, prominent. It's me, Jesse and Ari. If they test me, they sorry. Riders up like a Harley, then pull off in this Ferrari. If he hanging, we banging. Phone ringing, he slanging. It ain't karaoke night, but get the mic 'cause I'm singing. B to the A, to the N to the G. B to the A, to the N to the G. Hey.
Okay.